Well, hello everybody, my name is Roger and welcome to my channel, Roger's Reads. So today I'm doing my January mid-month wrap-up. That is to say the part one of all the books that I've read in January. So the first book that I read this month was entitled The Trauma Cleaner. That was written by Krasnostein, and this is actually my first book of the year, and it's a non-fiction book, which is a little bit unusual for me, though I did want to read a little more non-fiction this year, so I guess I'm off to a good start. So The Trauma Cleaner is part memoir, part biography that follows a transgender woman named Sandra Pankhurst, owner of a trauma cleaning business. So what Sandra and her crew do is enter the properties of suicide victims, murder victims, hoarders, and drug addicts and cleans these sites up. So in this book we follow along with Sandra and the author as we enter a few of these sites, and some of the descriptions thereof are pretty horrendous. But in addition to cleaning up, Sandra also enters into the lives of the occupants, gently leading them and guiding them to hopefully a little better way of living away from the hoarding and the filth. So as she does so, we get to hear the stories of some of the hoarders, all of which I found utterly fascinating. But this isn't just a look at the business of trauma cleaning, though that part is very interesting. The Trauma Cleaner is also about Sandra's personal life, in which we learn that she began life as a boy named Peter, and during her childhood suffered pretty horribly at the hands of an abusive and alcoholic father. I found Sandra's story to be utterly fascinating, as she's gone through more ups and downs than most of us can even begin to imagine. But her story is quite an inspiring one. It's a story of a strong woman who overcame one difficult situation after another by sheer force of will. And I love the way that she reinvented herself over and over again. Additionally fascinating was the peek into the lives of the hoarders. And you know, what I found surprising was how hoarding does not discriminate on the basis of income or intelligence, but rather hoarders can be anyone from a drug addict to someone holding a PhD. So all in all, the Trauma Cleaner was an engaging, mesmerizing, and poignant look at the life of a fascinating person. So the next book that I read in January thus far is entitled A Perfect 10 by Phillips. So I was in a mood for something that wasn't too heavy, and this book fit the bill. It was a fun blend of teen romance with a tad of magical realism thrown in, resulting in a swooning young adult romantic comedy. So Perfect 10 follows Sam Raines, who I believe is 17, and who, after having broken up with his boyfriend 2 years prior, is lonely. So he's ready to find a new boyfriend, but that's not an easy task given that there's only one other gay kid at school that he knows of. So his best friend Meg, who is a Wiccan, offers to perform a love spell for Sam. All he has to do is make a list of the top 10 traits that he wants his new boy to have, and then petition the goddess. Now Sam is not really a believer in Meg's religion, but decides to give it a go, figuring his love life could use all the help he can get. So, in a midnight ceremony ritual involving candles, invoking the elements, and a spell recited in Latin, Sam burns his list, thus sending out his intent to the universe. So, much to Sam's surprise, the spell seems to have worked, but not quite in the way that he'd intended. Instead of bringing one perfect guy to his doorstep, the spell brings 3 of them. Oh, and there's also Sam's ex-boyfriend Landon, who still seems to hold a special place in Sam's heart, causing Sam much confusion. So as it turns out, all 4 of them make a play for Sam's heart, and now all Sam has to do is choose. But of course, it's not as easy as it sounds, leading to much drama and both romantic and sexual tension, all of which renders the story very compelling. I especially liked the secondary cast of characters and also found them quite relatable. I especially enjoyed the friendship between Sam, Landon, and Meg, and felt that the events of their relationship demonstrated the ups and downs of friendship nicely, especially when loyalties became tested from time to time. Additionally, I felt that the magical realism aspect of the story really lent a feeling of fun and intrigue to it. And truth be told, it was the magical realism aspect of it that caused me to pick up this book in the first place. So, I thought Perfect 10 was a sweet, light-hearted gay romance that overall I enjoyed. I especially enjoyed the heartwarming conclusion that gives you all the right feels. So in this way, it was quite an engaging story. So the third book that I read this month thus far is entitled Warbreaker, written by Brandon Sanderson. So you might be saying, another Brandon Sanderson novel, Roger? Imagine my surprise. Yes, well, this is actually a book that's sat on my shelves now for quite some time, and I've been meaning to get to it. Well, I finally did, and boy, what a ride it was. So Warbreaker is a story that follows two sisters who are princesses, a powerful hand of mercenaries, a powerful yet deadly and mysterious warrior, a flippant atheist god who seems to take nothing at all seriously, a group of other gods and goddesses, all of whom have returned from the dead, and finally the god king of this world, the ultimate ruler. So there are two kingdoms in this story, Idris, from where the two princesses come, and Hyttinen, which is ruled by the silent yet powerful and fearsome god king. So, these two cities have been barely tolerating each other for 3 centuries, but now the king of Idris has to make good on his contract of marriage. You see, one of his daughters, one of the two princesses, has been promised to the God King with the goal of producing for him an heir, while maintaining the peace between the two rival nations. But things turn out a little differently than expected when one of the daughters is en route to marry the God King and the other has taken on a personal rescue mission to save her sister. So the rest of the story takes place in Hyttinen, where we're introduced to the living gods called the Returned, because they've returned from the dead. The few who do come back from the dead are then worshipped as gods. We're also introduced to a really interesting magic system called breaths, revolving around the breath and colors. So a breath is a chromatic essence of a person, almost like part of a person's soul, and each person is born with one breath, which can be given by one person and taken by another. So the person who gives his breath away then becomes a drab, in which the world appears to the person pretty much gray and colorless. Now, the person receiving the breath is bestowed with heightened senses in which they're able to discern subtle distinctions in color and sound. They're also infused with magic, making them capable of animating objects such as clothing, rope, dead squirrels, and even little men made of straw, and commanding said objects to do their bidding. So this system is called awakening, and each person needs a lot of breaths to perform an awakening. There are actually some pretty fascinating scenes involving animated objects and zombie-like awakened characters. So the author really has a knack for coming up with creative magic systems that are intricate, clever, unique, yet still easy for the reader to understand. So, as political chaos, conspiracies, backstabbing, and unrest begins brewing in the streets, we learn that someone is indeed trying to start a war. And it's up to only a few people to prevent it. So, as is typical in Brandon Sanderson novels, in my opinion, the plotting and world building were outstanding. Now, in this story, Sanderson gives us a rich world filled with riveting history and mythology, fascinating politics, an intriguing mystery, and numerous twists, resulting in a truly immersive read. It also has an excellent cast of believable characters, a plausible world, an intriguing political system, and a thoroughly satisfying conclusion. So the next book that I read in January was entitled Thomas Wildus and the Book of Sorrows. And this was actually an ARC that I received, an advanced reader copy, which is going to be released on February 2nd, I do believe. So this is a middle grade fantasy that follows 13-year-old Thomas Wildus, whose father, shortly before disappearing when Thomas was 6, told Thomas, "Magic is real, Thomas. No matter what happens, always remember, magic is real." So now, 7 years later, Thomas has not forgotten the words of his father, and he has not outgrown his interest nor his belief in magic. So, Thomas's life takes a dramatic turn one day after seeing a curious old bookshop that he'd never noticed before and decides to go in. So, once inside, he meets an odd little man who offers Thomas a book called the Book of Sorrows, which is supposedly quite ancient and comes with a set of rigid instructions. The man offers to lend Thomas the book as long as Thomas promises to strictly adhere to the instructions, especially the stringent rule of secrecy. Thomas agrees and takes the book home. But what's interesting here is that strange things begin to occur once he begins reading the book. For one thing, the cover of the book slowly begins to change, and it becomes clear to Thomas pretty quickly that there may be a supernatural element at play here. Then, Thomas gets the feeling that he's being followed. An old friend of his father's suddenly comes to visit, offering to tutor Thomas, and then there are numerous strange people that Thomas keeps seeing, some of whom have a really unsettling effect on him. So Thomas figures that it is his possession of the book that's causing so much attention, and without even realizing it, he is soon drawn into a world of magic. Moreover, he learns that he himself has magical abilities just waiting to be discovered, and that he also has a secret family history and a destiny awaiting him. That is, of course, if he can stop a powerful magical enemy from arising and destroying everything he holds dear. So this was a wickedly fun and richly imaginative middle grade fantasy with a compelling plot and endearing characters. This little gem of a book has magic, action, mystery, intrigue, and rollicking adventure, and held my interest until the wild ending. So the next book that I read this month was a little tiny book entitled Art Matters. So this is a little book written by Neil Gaiman and illustrated by Ridell, both whose work I really enjoy. And it's drawn together from speeches, poems, and creative manifestos. This book explores and shows how reading, imagining, and creating can change the world. So one of the chapters that was familiar to me in this book was the one entitled Make Good Art, which was Gaiman's famous and moving 2012 commencement address delivered at the Philadelphia University of the Arts. Now, if you have not seen this address, I highly recommend it. You should be able to easily find it on YouTube, because I'm pretty sure that's where I first watched it. There's also another essay here entitled On Libraries, which is an impassioned argument for libraries that discusses their importance to our future and how they foster readers and daydreamers. Now, this is really a tiny little book without a lot of words, but one that you can spend weeks, months, years, hell, a lifetime thinking about. It's also chock full of breathtaking illustrations. I really love Chris Ridell's work here. In addition to the illustrations, the book is full of profound wisdom in short, concise, to-the-point prose that celebrates art and outlines methods for artistic success. And not just monetary success, but also personal fulfillment as well. You know, there are so many nuggets of wisdom spread in so few pages that I'm not going to say too much more about this, lest I take away someone's enjoyment in reading it and discovering these gems for yourself. But let me just say that Art Matters is really an inspiring book and truly worth the read. And last but not least is a book entitled Darius the Great is Not Okay by Adib Khorram. So I went into this book knowing pretty much nothing about it, and what an amazing read it turned out to be. So Darius the Great is Not Okay follows Darius, a friendless, tea-obsessed, clinically depressed, half-Persian, half-American teen who refers to himself as a fractional Persian. And given that he isn't at all connected to his Persian family or his culture, he doesn't feel like a very good Persian, in fact. Even his little sister speaks better Farsi than he does. So Darius, he is nerdy and awkward, and he feels that he doesn't really fit in anywhere. It also doesn't help that he has a super critical, disapproving father who has taken on the task of monitoring and making snide comments about everything Darius puts into his mouth, constantly reminding the boy that he needs to lose weight. You know, I found it interesting how Darius always refers to his father by his first and last name, Stephen Kellner. He'll say, Stephen Kellner did this, Stephen Kellner came here, etc., etc. Another favorite name that Darius had for his father was, Übermensch. Given that his father is a handsome blonde German who seems to be the perfect idealized man. But overall, Darius feels that he is a huge disappointment to his father, and the way he sees it, his father makes no effort to hide that disappointment. The one thing that both Darius and his father have in common, however, is that they both take daily medication so that their depression doesn't get out of hand. So Darius' life changes when he's told that he's going to be taking a trip to Iran for the first time with his mom, dad, and sister to meet his mother's family, including his grandparents, who up to this point he's only known via Skype. The reason for the trip is that his grandfather, Babu, has a brain tumor and doesn't have much time left. So there, Darius meets a boy named Sorab, a neighbor boy who is quite close to Darius' grandparents, and everything changes for Darius. Sorab convinces Darius to play soccer with him and his friends, and Darius is surprised that he actually likes it, and is also rather good at it. So together, the two boys visit various historical landmarks, and through Sorab, Darius learns more about his heritage, and he begins to feel like a real Persian for the first time in his life. So Darius discovers that he can not only confide in Sorab, but his new friend actually seems to understand him, perhaps being the only person in Darius' life who does. But most importantly, Sorab helps him to realize his self-worth and helps him to accept who he really is. So this is an emotionally powerful story that deals with many serious topics. But most of all, this was a lovely coming-of-age book about a boy reconnecting with his Persian heritage and discovering himself in the process. It's a story with memorable and endearing characters that is really full of heart, and I absolutely love this book. And that is it for my mid-month January wrap-up. And if you like this video, I'd appreciate it if you click the like button below, as it would really help my channel out. And subscribe if you haven't as well. So that is it. I will talk to you in the next video. Roger and out.